A true story. On my 69th birthday, my son wanted to seize my inheritance, so she cruelly. Funny thing about those dates, I had my calendar right here. Doctor appointment on March 15th? I was in the emergency room with chest pains that day, surrounded by witnesses. Family dinner where I seemed disoriented on April 2nd? That was the day Rebecca announced she was redecorating the ranch house, without asking me first. I'd been quiet because I was furious, not confused. Have you ever trusted someone who was secretly planning to take everything from you? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The courier knocked twice before I realized he wasn't delivering birthday flowers. The envelope was thick, legal-sized, and cold in my hands like a death notice. If you've ever wondered how far family will go to steal everything you've built, this story will shake you to your core. Have you ever trusted someone who was secretly planning to take everything from you? Do you know someone whose own children turned against them for money? Leonard discovered his bank accounts were already frozen before breakfast ended on his 69th birthday. How do you fight back when family becomes your enemy? Follow along as we uncover a betrayal that's been building for years, hidden behind Sunday dinners and birthday cards. Your own son just legally declared you incompetent, on your birthday. That's exactly what happened to me, Leonard Martinez, on what should have been a quiet morning in Phoenix, Arizona. I'd planned to water my cactus garden, maybe call my grandkids, then drive out to check on the New Mexico ranch my father left me. Instead, I'm standing in my kitchen holding papers that say I'm too confused to handle my own money. The petition was professionally typed, bound with those little metal fasteners lawyers love. My son Marcus had filed it 3 days earlier, claiming I showed signs of mental decline and needed a guardian to manage my finances. The ranch, worth nearly $4 million, was specifically mentioned as needing immediate professional oversight. But here's what made my blood run cold: the signature on the medical evaluation. It was supposed to be mine, confirming that I'd met with Dr. Patricia Henley for a competency assessment. Problem was, I'd never heard that name in my life. I set the papers on my kitchen counter next to yesterday's newspaper, the crossword I'd completed in 12 minutes. My coffee was still steaming. The morning news was talking about stock markets I'd been tracking for 30 years. Everything around me screamed competent, capable, alert. The phone rang. My bank. Mr. Martinez, we're calling about the court order. Your accounts are now under restricted access pending the guardianship hearing. Restricted access. Those words hit like a physical blow. 69 years old, never missed a bill payment, never bounced a check, and suddenly I couldn't access money I'd earned with my own hands. I walked to my home office, past family photos showing Marcus as a boy, learning to ride horses on the ranch. His wife Rebecca wasn't in any of those pictures, she'd only been around for 2 years. But her influence was everywhere in this petition. The language was too smooth, too legal for Marcus. He'd barely graduated high school. The ranch lease payment was due next week. $15,000 that kept the cattle operation running and provided income for 3 local families. If that bounced, everything my father built would start crumbling. I pulled out my reading glasses and went through the petition line by line. According to these papers, I'd been confused during recent conversations and unable to manage complex financial decisions. The evidence? 3 incidents where I'd allegedly forgotten appointments or mixed up dates. Funny thing about those dates, I had my calendar right here. Doctor appointment on March 15th? I was in the emergency room with chest pains that day, surrounded by witnesses. Family dinner where I seemed disoriented on April 2nd? That was the day Rebecca announced she was redecorating the ranch house, without asking me first. I'd been quiet because I was furious, not confused. If your family turned on you like this, you'd want someone watching your back. Subscribe so you never miss the warning signs that could save your legacy. I recognized the handwriting on the medical affidavit. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't any doctor I'd ever seen. Pause and remember that handwriting detail, it becomes the key to everything. The ATM screen blinked, account restricted, 3 times before I understood. My own money, gone with a court order I'd never seen. I stood there in the Bank of America parking lot, debit card in one hand, rejection slip in the other. 69 years of responsible banking, and now I couldn't withdraw $20 for lunch. The ranch account was worse. I called from the bank lobby, and the automated system confirmed my worst fear: insufficient funds for automatic payments. The feed supplier, the property insurance, the utilities, everything would start bouncing by tomorrow. Mr. Martinez? The bank manager, Jennifer, recognized me from 15 years of regular visits. I'm sorry about this situation. The court order came through yesterday afternoon. She slid a folder across her desk. Inside were copies of documents I'd never signed, authorizing someone named Rebecca Martinez as my financial oversight representative. My daughter-in-law had somehow gotten legal authority over accounts she'd never contributed to. When was this account modification requested? I asked. Jennifer checked her computer. 3 weeks ago. It shows you came in personally to sign the preliminary paperwork. 3 weeks ago, I was in Albuquerque visiting my brother after his surgery. I had gas receipts and hospital visitor logs to prove it. But according to the bank's records, I'd been sitting in this very office, signing away my financial independence. The ranch property manager called while I was still at the bank. Leonard, the lease payment bounced. The cattle company is asking questions. What's going on? 23 families depended on that ranch operation. Good people who'd worked the land for generations, just like my father had. Now their paychecks were in jeopardy because of papers I'd never seen and signatures I'd never made. I drove home through Phoenix traffic, thinking about the phone call I'd have to make. Marcus had always been easily influenced, even as a kid. Rebecca was different. She asked pointed questions about the ranch's value, about mineral rights, about my health insurance. Questions that seemed caring at the time but felt calculated now. Back home, I called Marcus directly. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been expecting it. Dad, this is for your own good. You've seemed confused lately, forgetting things. Rebecca noticed it first. What things, Marcus? What exactly have I forgotten? Long pause. Well, you seemed lost at dinner last month. And you asked the same question twice. I remembered that dinner. Rebecca had been explaining why the ranch needed updating, solar panels, new fencing, a management company to handle day-to-day operations. I'd asked twice because her answers didn't make sense, not because I was confused. The bank manager slid a photocopy across the desk. This medical evaluation was filed 3 weeks ago. You signed it here. Ever had your signature used against you when you never wrote it? I found the leather folder exactly where Dad left it, behind tax returns nobody bothers reading. Inside was proof I was sharper than they thought. My father was a meticulous man. Every receipt, every contract, every medical report filed in chronological order with notes written in his precise handwriting. When he died 5 years ago, I'd continued his system without thinking about it. Now that habit might save everything I owned. The folder contained 30 years of ranch documentation. Lease agreements I'd negotiated, tax returns showing consistent profit, correspondence with agricultural extensions proving I understood complex farming regulations. Every document contradicted the claim that I was mentally declining. But the real treasure was my medical file. Annual checkups, blood pressure monitoring, even cognitive assessments from my regular doctor. Dr. Williams had been tracking my mental sharpness for years because I'd specifically asked him to. I'd watched my grandfather struggle with dementia and wanted early warning signs. The latest evaluation was from 6 months ago. Dr. Williams had written, "Patient demonstrates excellent cognitive function, sharp memory for details, and sophisticated understanding of financial planning. No concerns regarding mental capacity." This wasn't just a casual checkup. I'd paid for comprehensive testing because Rebecca had started making comments about my senior moments. Now I understood why she'd been so interested in the results. I spread the documents across my kitchen table and started building a timeline. The petition claimed I'd shown confusion during 3 specific incidents. But my calendar, my medical records, and even my credit card statements told a different story. March 15th, allegedly missed a doctor appointment due to confusion. Reality, I was in the emergency room with chest pains, surrounded by medical staff who noted my alert and oriented mental state in their reports. April 2nd, supposedly seemed disoriented during family dinner. Reality. I'd been quietly furious about Rebecca's suggestion that I hire a management company to run the ranch. My silence wasn't confusion, it was self-control. April 20th, claimed I repeated the same question multiple times during a phone call. Reality, I'd been asking Marcus to clarify Rebecca's conflicting statements about ranch improvements. The questions were different each time because her answers kept changing. Documentation like this saves lives and legacies. Subscribe to learn what records you should be keeping right now, before it's too late. I pulled out my magnifying glass, the same one Dad used for reading contracts, and examined the medical evaluation more closely. The signature looked like mine from a distance, but the pressure was wrong. I press hard when I write, a habit from decades of filling out forms in windy conditions on the ranch. This signature was too light, too careful. Dr. Patricia Henley's letterhead looked professional, but something felt off. I'd lived in Phoenix for 40 years and knew most of the medical community. I'd never heard her name, never seen her practice advertised. I called information. No listing for Dr. Patricia Henley in Phoenix. No listing in Scottsdale, Tempe, or Mesa either. According to the phone company, she didn't exist. But according to the court petition, she'd spent an hour evaluating my mental state and concluded I was unfit to manage my own affairs. The evaluation was detailed, professional, and completely fabricated. My hands shook as I reached for the phone. Not from age or confusion, from rage. Someone had forged a medical report, stolen my signature, and convinced my own son to betray me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about destroying everything my father had built and everything I'd worked to preserve. The medical evaluation claimed I was confused during interview. Problem was, I'd never met that doctor in my life. What would you do with proof of a forged medical report? Margaret read the petition twice, her reading glasses slipping down her nose. Leonard, this isn't sloppy fraud. This is professional. I'd found Margaret Thompson after Sunday service at Desert Cross Lutheran, where I'd been attending for 15 years. She was quiet, methodical, and had spent 30 years as a court clerk before retiring. If anyone could spot legal manipulation, it was her. We sat in the church coffee room, documents spread across a folding table between us. Margaret examined each page with the patience of someone who'd seen every kind of legal trick. This medical evaluation is textbook fraud, she said, tapping the forged signature with her pen. But it's sophisticated. Someone knows exactly how these guardianship cases work. She pulled out a red pen and started marking dates. Leonard, where were you on March 22nd? I checked my calendar. Surgery. Gallbladder removal at Phoenix General. According to this evaluation, you were in Dr. Henley's office, demonstrating cognitive impairment. Margaret circled the date. That's your first timeline problem. She continued marking contradictions. Every claimed incident of confusion coincided with documented proof of my competence. The pattern was too convenient to be accidental. Someone's been watching you, Margaret said. They know your schedule, your habits, your medical history. This isn't family greed, this is organized theft. She opened her purse and pulled out a small notebook, the kind court clerks use for case notes. I've seen this before, Leonard. Different families, same pattern. Fake medical evaluations, forged signatures, adult children convinced their parents are failing. The coffee room suddenly felt cold. How many families? In my last 5 years before retirement? Dozen, maybe more. Always involved valuable property. Always included a new spouse or in-law pushing the process. Margaret's voice dropped. Most families never fought back. They accepted the guardianship and lost everything. She pointed to the medical letterhead. Dr. Patricia Henley. I remember that name from a case 3 years ago. Elderly rancher in Tucson, similar situation. The family hired a private investigator. What did they find? No medical license. No practice. No existence. But by the time they proved it, the ranch was sold and the money was gone. Margaret closed the petition and looked at me directly. Leonard, you have 2 advantages those other families didn't have. First, you kept meticulous records. Second, you're fighting back before the final hearing. She gathered the documents into a neat stack. I know someone who can help. Young paralegal in Tucson who specializes in elder fraud cases. Her name is Maria Santos, and she's good at what she does. Margaret wrote the contact information on church letterhead. Call her tomorrow. Don't wait. These people are counting on you being too embarrassed or too tired to fight. I shook her hand at the church door, grateful for the first person who'd believed me completely. Why are you helping me? Because my father died thinking his own children saw him as incompetent. He wasn't, he was just trusting the wrong people. Margaret's eyes were sharp with old anger. Nobody should lose their dignity to professional thieves. Margaret circled 3 dates in red ink. These signatures happened when you were in surgery. I have the hospital records. Flag those 3 dates, they destroy the entire case. The paralegal's office smelled like coffee and justice. Maria Santos spread my documents across her desk like a detective solving murder. I'd driven 2 hours from Phoenix to Tucson, carrying everything Margaret had told me to bring. Maria was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and the kind of confidence that comes from winning fights nobody expected you to win. Mr. Martinez, I've been waiting for a case like yours, she said, pulling on reading glasses that made her look older. Elder fraud is exploding across Arizona, and the criminals are getting smarter. She examined the forged medical evaluation first, holding it up to the light. Professional paper, official letterhead, perfect formatting. This took time and money to create. Have you seen Dr. Henley's name before? Maria opened a thick file cabinet and pulled out a folder marked Fraud Patterns, 2023. Inside were copies of similar medical evaluations, all bearing the same signature. Patricia Henley has evaluated 43 elderly people in the past 2 years. All were declared incompetent. All had valuable property. My stomach dropped. 43 families? 43 that I know of. Could be more. Maria spread the evaluations across her desk. Same handwriting, same conclusions, same recommendations for immediate guardianship. But here's the interesting part. None of these people ever met her. She pulled out a map of Arizona and started placing red pins. Tucson, Phoenix, Flagstaff, Sedona. The pins formed a pattern across every wealthy retirement community in the state. This isn't random family greed, Mr. Martinez. This is organized crime targeting elderly property owners. They identify victims, research their assets, then manufacture the legal justification to steal everything. Elder fraud affects 1 in 5 families. Yours could be next. Subscribe to stay protected from legal predators targeting your parents. Maria opened her laptop and showed me a spreadsheet tracking the stolen properties. Ranch land, retirement homes, family businesses, over $40 million in assets transferred through fraudulent guardianships. How do they choose victims? Widowed or divorced, valuable property, adult children who live far away or have financial problems. You checked every box except one, you're fighting back. She pointed to a column on her spreadsheet labeled Resolved Cases. It was mostly empty. Most families don't realize what's happening until it's too late. By the time they understand the fraud, the property is sold and the money is hidden in offshore accounts. Maria stood and walked to a wall map marked with colored pins. Red pins are active cases, yellow are resolved through settlement, green are full victories. There were 47 red pins, 6 yellow pins, and only 2 green pins. Those odds don't look good. They weren't. Until recently. Maria smiled and pointed to a newspaper clipping on her desk. 3 months ago, we got our first criminal conviction. Dr. Patricia Henley is real. She's a disgraced psychiatrist from California who lost her license for insurance fraud. Now she works for a legal services company that specializes in asset protection for families. The news article included a photo. Henley looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a trustworthy medical professional: silver hair, kind eyes, reassuring smile. She's been arrested? House arrest pending trial. But the network is still operating. Your case might be the key to shutting down the entire operation. Maria pulled out a thick file. I've seen this exact scheme before. Same lawyer, same medical evaluator, same outcome. How many families do you think they've destroyed? The medical evaluator had examined 12 incapacitated elders in 6 months. All had valuable land. All lost everything. Maria's research was devastating in its thoroughness. She'd tracked every case involving Dr. Henley's evaluations, cross-referenced property records, and followed the money trail. What she found wasn't just fraud, it was systematic theft operating across state lines. Look at this pattern, Maria said, highlighting dates on a calendar. March through August, 12 elderly property owners were declared incompetent. April through September, their properties were listed for sale. By October, everything was sold at below-market prices to the same investment group. The investment group had a familiar name: Heritage Land Holdings LLC. The registered agent was Rebecca Martinez, my daughter-in-law. I stared at the documents until the letters blurred. She's been planning this for 2 years. Longer than that. Maria pulled out incorporation papers. Heritage Land Holdings was registered 6 months before she married your son. This wasn't love, Mr. Martinez. This was a business plan. The scope was breathtaking. Rebecca hadn't just targeted me, she'd identified wealthy elderly landowners across Arizona and New Mexico, researched their family situations, and systematically positioned herself to steal their property. How does she find the victims? Maria showed me a stack of community newsletters from retirement areas, church bulletins, and obituary notices. All had been marked with red pen, circling names and property descriptions. She attends estate sales, church services, community events. She identifies recent widowers or people with family problems, then introduces herself as a helpful neighbor or friend. Once she gains trust, she gathers information about assets and family relationships. The method was horrifyingly simple. Rebecca would befriend elderly property owners, learn about their family dynamics, then introduce unmarried male relatives, like my son Marcus, to their adult children. The romance was always fast, the marriage always included discussions about protecting family assets, and the guardianship petitions always followed within 2 years. Marcus was just another tool. I'm sorry, but yes. Look at this. Maria showed me social media posts going back 3 years. Rebecca had attended estate sales and community events throughout Arizona, always photographed with different elderly people. Always asking about their family situations. In one photo from a Tucson church fundraiser, she was holding hands with an elderly rancher named William Chen. According to the court records, Mr. Chen was declared incompetent 4 months later. His ranch sold for 60% of its appraised value to Heritage Land Holdings. Where is Mr. Chen now? County nursing home. Medicaid pays the bills because his assets were properly managed through the guardianship process. I thought about the Sunday dinners where Rebecca had seemed so interested in my health, my finances, my relationship with Marcus. Every question had been research. Every concern had been calculation. Maria opened another file marked Financial Analysis. The stolen properties had generated over $40 million in illegal profits, split between a network of lawyers, fake medical professionals, and shell companies. The consultation fees all went to the same LLC, registered to your daughter-in-law. Maria highlighted the bank transfers. She's not just a criminal, Mr. Martinez. She's the criminal running the operation. The phone rang. Maria checked the caller ID and smiled. Perfect timing. That's Detective Rodriguez from the Arizona Attorney General's office. She's been investigating organized elder fraud for 2 years. This wasn't just family greed. This was organized crime. I found Dad's original will in the safety deposit box they forgot existed. Everything they claimed was documented, but it told a different story. The Bank of Arizona branch in downtown Phoenix had been holding my father's safety deposit box since 1987. I'd paid the annual fee automatically, but honestly forgot what was inside. Rebecca's research had been thorough, but she'd missed this one detail. The box was registered under my maiden name from before Dad remarried. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence spanning 40 years. Dad's original ranch purchase agreements, geological surveys showing mineral rights, and correspondence with agricultural development companies. But the most valuable document was his final will, updated just 3 months before he died. The will included detailed instructions for protecting the ranch from gold diggers and fortune hunters. Dad had seen this coming. If my son Leonard faces challenges to his mental capacity, the will stated, refer to the enclosed medical evaluations and financial competency assessments. He'd paid for comprehensive testing in 2019, just to establish a baseline. The medical reports were thorough. Cognitive testing, memory assessments, problem-solving evaluations, all showing I was sharper at 64 than most people half my age. The neurologist had written a specific note: patient demonstrates exceptional mental acuity and sophisticated understanding of complex financial matters. But the real bombshell was in Dad's personal letter, sealed and marked, to be opened only if Leonard's competency is questioned. Son, he'd written in his careful handwriting, if you're reading this, someone is trying to steal what we built. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Fight back with facts, not emotions. The ranch isn't just land, it's proof that our family doesn't give up. He'd included photocopies of every major financial decision I'd made since inheriting the property. Successful negotiations with cattle companies, profitable mineral rights leases, smart water rights purchases, 5 years of evidence proving my business judgment was excellent. Your loved ones need proof you're protecting them now. Subscribe for estate protection strategies that stop family predators cold. The safety deposit box also contained something I'd never seen, a private investigator's report from 2018. Dad had hired someone to research Rebecca when she first started dating Marcus. The report was devastating. Rebecca Martinez wasn't even her real name. She was born Rebecca Caldwell in Nevada, had been married twice before, and both previous husbands had lost significant assets in bitter divorce proceedings. One had filed a restraining order claiming she'd stolen financial documents and forged his signature on loan applications. Subject demonstrates pattern of targeting men with valuable assets, the investigator had written. Previous relationships ended with suspicious financial transfers and accusations of document fraud. Dad had known. He'd tried to warn Marcus, but my son was already too involved to listen. The investigator's report included photos of Rebecca at estate sales and community events, always talking to elderly property owners, always asking about their family situations. The final document in the box was Dad's handwritten timeline, tracking Rebecca's behavior over 18 months. Church services where she'd shown unusual interest in widowed members. Coffee dates with elderly ranchers' wives, asking detailed questions about their husbands' health and finances. Real estate meetings where she'd volunteered to help with paperwork. This woman is hunting, Dad had written. She's patient, professional, and dangerous. If something happens to me, make sure Leonard sees this file. Something had happened to him. Heart attack, sudden and fatal. But not before he'd built a fortress of evidence to protect everything we'd worked for. The will had a codicil I'd never seen. Dad knew this might happen, and he prepared. What did Leonard's father predict that nobody else saw coming? The judge's voice was flat, petition dismissed pending investigation. I didn't smile. I exhaled 5 weeks of held breath. The Maricopa County Courthouse felt like a church when Judge Patricia Williams spoke those words. Marcus sat 3 rows behind me, looking confused and defeated. Rebecca wasn't there. Maria had informed us she'd left town the day before, claiming a family emergency in California. Maria had presented our evidence methodically. Dad's safety deposit box documents, my medical evaluations, the timeline contradictions, and most importantly, proof that Dr. Patricia Henley had never examined me. The judge studied each document with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many elder fraud cases. Mr. Martinez, Judge Williams said, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into this alleged medical evaluation. I'm also issuing a temporary restraining order preventing any asset transfers while this matter is under review. The bank accounts were unfrozen within hours. I could access my own money, pay the ranch bills, and restore the cattle operation that kept 3 families employed. But the real victory wasn't financial, it was being believed. Marcus approached me outside the courthouse, looking older than his 42 years. Dad, I'm sorry. Rebecca said you were getting confused, forgetting things. She showed me examples, incidents where you seemed lost. What incidents, son? Like when you asked about ranch improvements 3 times during one dinner. I remembered that dinner. Rebecca had been pushing for expensive upgrades that made no business sense. I'd asked detailed questions because her proposals were financially ridiculous, not because I was confused. Marcus, did Rebecca ever show you actual medical reports? Evaluations from doctors you knew? He shook his head. She said they were confidential. Patient privacy laws. My son had been manipulated as thoroughly as I'd been attacked. Rebecca had played both sides, convincing him I was declining while positioning herself to steal everything I owned. Dad, what happens now? Now we find out how deep this goes. Maria joined us on the courthouse steps, carrying a folder thick with new documents. The Attorney General's office is interested, Mr. Martinez. Very interested. Your case might be the key to a much larger investigation. She showed us a photograph from the prosecutor's file. Rebecca Martinez, smiling at a charity event, standing next to an elderly man with a walker. The caption read, "Local woman helps elderly rancher with estate planning." The elderly man was William Chin, who'd lost his Tucson ranch to Heritage Land Holdings 6 months ago. Rebecca had been photographed helping him just weeks before his family filed for guardianship. How many others? I asked. We're counting 47 confirmed victims. But there might be more. The prosecutor approached me afterward. Mr. Martinez, this goes much deeper than your family. Justice felt good, but was it over? My son sat across the kitchen table where I'd taught him to read. Now he couldn't look me in the eyes while his wife did the talking. Rebecca had returned from California 3 days after the court hearing, walking into my house like she still belonged there. She brought Marcus with her, positioning him between us like a human shield. The woman who tried to steal my life's work was sitting in my kitchen, drinking my coffee, and acting like the victim. Leonard, you've blown this completely out of proportion, she said, her voice calm and reasonable. We were only trying to protect your assets from potential exploitation. The audacity was breathtaking. Protect them from who? From unscrupulous people who prey on elderly property owners. She said this without a hint of irony, while simultaneously being exactly that kind of predator. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Dad, the ranch is worth millions. Rebecca was worried about people taking advantage of you. People like your wife? Rebecca's mask slipped for just a moment. Her eyes went cold, calculating. That's an ugly accusation from someone who's been making questionable financial decisions. What questionable decisions? She pulled out a folder I recognized. My ranch financial records, copied from documents she'd somehow accessed. The cattle lease renewal at below market rates. The mineral rights deal you signed without consulting experts. The water rights purchase that cost twice what it should have. Every decision she mentioned had been profitable. The cattle lease was structured for long-term stability, not short-term profit. The mineral rights deal had already paid for itself through oil exploration fees. The water rights purchase would be worth 10 times what I'd paid within 5 years. But Rebecca presented each decision as evidence of declining judgment, twisting successful business choices into proof of incompetence. She'd been building this narrative for 2 years, documenting every transaction she could criticize. Rebecca, how did you get copies of my financial records? Marcus provided them. He was concerned about some of your choices. I looked at my son, who was staring at his hands. Marcus, did you really give her access to my private financial information? She said it was to protect you, Dad. To make sure you weren't being cheated. Family betrayal cuts deepest when you never see it coming. Subscribe, your legacy deserves better protection than Leonard had. Rebecca leaned forward, playing the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly. Leonard, we all want what's best for you. But you have to admit, some of your recent decisions have been unusual. Unusual how? The safety deposit box you never mentioned. The private investigator reports. The suspicious behavior toward family members who only want to help. She paused dramatically. These aren't the actions of someone thinking clearly. She was good. Every piece of evidence I'd used to defend myself, she was turning into proof of paranoia and decline. The safety deposit box became hidden assets. Dad's investigator report became unfounded suspicions. My legal defense became aggressive behavior. Leonard, we're not your enemies, she continued. We're your family. We love you and want to make sure you're protected. I stood and walked to the kitchen counter, where I'd left the folder Maria had given me. Inside were photographs of Rebecca with other elderly victims, bank records showing Heritage Land Holdings transactions, and copies of forged medical evaluations. Rebecca, I have some photographs I'd like you to see. Her composure cracked. Photographs of what? You with William Chen. You with Martha Rodriguez. You with Robert Kim. I placed each photo on the table. All of them declared incompetent after meeting you. All of them lost their property to Heritage Land Holdings. Marcus looked at the photos, then at his wife. Rebecca, who are these people? She smiled and said, you can't prove anything that matters. Then I pulled out the recording device. Had you been recording family conversations, would you have caught the lies? Her voice on the recording was crystal clear. The old man will never know what hit him until it's over. I'd started recording conversations the day Maria suggested that Rebecca might return for one final manipulation attempt. The device was small, digital, and had been running for 20 minutes when Rebecca finally revealed her true self. The recording captured everything. Her dismissive tone when talking about Marcus, her detailed knowledge of my financial assets, and most damning, her casual discussion of the systematic fraud she'd been running. You can't seriously think this elderly man figured out our entire operation, she'd said to someone on a phone call while Marcus was in the bathroom. He's got access to some legal help, but we've been planning this for 3 years. One confused old rancher isn't going to destroy everything we've built. She'd mentioned specific details that only someone running the fraud would know. The fake medical evaluations, the forged documents, the network of lawyers and shell companies. But the most chilling part was her discussion of other victims. The Chin Ranch sold faster than expected. Clean profit after expenses was $2.1 million. The Rodriguez property is more complicated because of the family trust, but we should have it resolved by Christmas. She talked about stolen ranches like a real estate developer discussing legitimate transactions. No guilt, no hesitation, just cold calculation about other people's life savings. Marcus had returned from the bathroom while she was still on the phone. I watched my son's face change as he heard his wife discussing elderly victims like inventory items. Rebecca, who are you talking to? She'd ended the call quickly, but the damage was done. Marcus had heard enough to understand that his wife wasn't protecting anyone, she was predator systematically destroying families. Dad, is that recording everything? I nodded. Marcus sat down heavily, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Rebecca, you need to tell me the truth. Right now. What have you been doing? That's when she made her fatal mistake. Instead of denying everything, she tried to justify it. Marcus, your father is old. He's making poor decisions, and that ranch is worth too much to leave to chance. We're protecting family assets from his declining judgment. By lying about medical evaluations? By taking necessary steps to preserve what should be your inheritance anyway. The recording captured Marcus's growing horror as Rebecca explained the systematic fraud. How she'd identified victims through community events and church services. How she'd researched their assets and family relationships. How she'd positioned herself to steal millions of dollars in property from elderly owners. How many families have you done this to? 47 successful transfers. Your father would have been 48. She said this like she was discussing a successful business quarter. No remorse, no acknowledgement that she destroyed lives. Just pride in her efficient theft operation. Marcus stood up from the table. Rebecca, you're talking about stealing from elderly people. People who trusted you. I'm talking about maximizing family wealth before old age and poor judgment wasted. The recording had been running for 18 minutes when Marcus finally asked the question that ended their marriage. Did you ever love me, or was I just part of your plan? Her pause before answering told him everything he needed to know. The recording lasted 18 minutes. The prosecutor called it textbook conspiracy evidence. Would you have had the patience to record your own family's betrayal? Ready to proceed with chapters 11 to 15, the final resolution section, when you approve this development. The handcuffs clicked louder than I expected. Rebecca's composed mask finally cracked when Detective Rodriguez read her rights in my kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd smiled and told me I couldn't prove anything that mattered. Rebecca Caldwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud, forgery, and organized theft. The detective's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was reading a grocery list. But watching my daughter-in-law's face change from confident to panicked. That was worth every sleepless night I'd spent gathering evidence. Marcus stood frozen by the refrigerator, still processing that his wife was leading him to prison. Dad, I didn't know it was this big, he whispered. The recording device had captured everything, Rebecca admitting to the 47 victim network, her partnership with Dr. Henley, even her plan to sell the ranch within 6 months of gaining control. Dr. Patricia Henley was arrested simultaneously at her Scottsdale office. Maria had coordinated with investigators in 3 states. The fake medical evaluations, the forged signatures, the shell companies, everything unraveled once they had Rebecca's confession on tape. Your courage saved dozens of families, Detective Rodriguez told me as they led Rebecca away. She's been running this scheme for 4 years. Your case broke it wide open. The district attorney called that afternoon. Mr. Martinez, we're charging Heritage Land Holdings as a criminal enterprise. Your evidence will help us recover stolen property for 46 other families. 46 families who lost everything because people like Rebecca saw weakness where they should have seen wisdom. Marcus stayed after the arrests, sitting at the kitchen table like a lost child. She told me you were getting confused, that we needed to protect you before you lost everything to scammers. His voice broke. I thought I was helping. Son, the only scammer was sitting at this table for 2 years, planning to steal everything your grandfather built. I pulled out the safety deposit box documents. Your wife studied inheritance law before she married you. This wasn't love, it was a business plan. The newspaper ran the story 3 days later. Local elder exposes multi-million-dollar inheritance fraud ring. But they missed the real story. It wasn't about the money or even the ranch. It was about a father realizing his son chose greed over family, and a grandfather watching his legacy nearly disappear because he trusted the wrong person. If your family turned against you tomorrow, would you have the evidence to fight back? Think about it. The investigation revealed Rebecca had targeted widowed ranch owners specifically. She'd find men with valuable land, marry their sons, then use legal manipulation to steal property. Professional, calculated, cold. Marcus filed for divorce the day after her arrest. I want to earn your trust back, Dad, he said. If you'll let me. The handcuffs were loud, but the silence afterward was louder. In that quiet, I realized something important. Sometimes the people who claim to protect you are the ones you need protection from. How many other families are saved by Leonard's fight? The keys to the ranch felt heavier than they had 6 months ago. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed when I drove through the gates of my father's New Mexico property for the first time since the legal nightmare began. The cottonwood trees still lined the driveway. The mountains still rose purple against the morning sky. But walking into the ranch office, I knew I was different. Not broken, stronger. Like metal that gets heated and hammered until it becomes something tougher than it started. The lease payments were current again. My bank accounts showed my name in black ink where Rebecca had tried to erase it. The property manager, Jim Valdez, shook my hand like I'd returned from war. "Mr. Martinez, I never believed those papers your son filed. You've been managing this place better than most half your age." In the office filing cabinet, I found everything exactly where I'd left it. Tax records, maintenance schedules, tenant agreements. 40 years of careful documentation that proved I wasn't the confused old man Rebecca's fake doctors claimed I was. My handwriting was steady. My decisions were sound. My mind was sharp. But then I saw something that made my hands shake. A letter addressed to me, sitting on the desk blotter, in Marcus's handwriting. The envelope was thick, like he'd written pages. The postmark showed he'd mailed it 3 days after Rebecca's arrest, before he knew whether I'd even read it. My name was written carefully across the front. "Dad, please read when you're ready." 47 other families had been targeted by Rebecca's criminal network. The district attorney said my case would help them recover millions in stolen property and fraudulent transfers. But sitting in that office, holding my son's letter, I realized the hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was deciding whether to forgive. The ranch represented 4 generations of hard work. My great-grandfather homesteaded this land when Arizona was still a territory. My grandfather expanded it during the Depression. My father taught me every inch of fence line and water source. Now I had to decide who would inherit it next. Rebecca was facing 15 years in federal prison. Dr. Henley would never practice medicine again. The Heritage Land Holdings Network was finished. Justice had been served, legally speaking. But Marcus was still my son. And the grandchildren I hadn't seen in 6 months were still my grandchildren. The letter sat unopened on the desk while I walked the property lines, checking fences that didn't need checking, counting cattle that didn't need counting. The sun was setting by the time I came back inside, and the envelope was still waiting. Some decisions can't be rushed. Some wounds need time to heal properly. And sometimes the hardest choice is between protecting yourself and giving someone a second chance. The ranch would be there tomorrow. The letter would wait until I was ready. In the ranch office, I found a letter addressed to me, in my son's handwriting. After everything, what could his son possibly say now? "Dad, I was weak and stupid, but not evil." The letter shook in my hands because I wanted to believe him. Marcus had written 12 pages. His handwriting looked younger somehow, like he was 15 again, apologizing for wrecking the truck or missing curfew. But this wasn't about teenage mistakes. This was about choosing his wife over his father, greed over family, lies over loyalty. Rebecca showed me medical reports that said you were getting confused. She had doctor's notes claiming you'd made dangerous financial decisions. When she suggested we needed legal guardianship to protect you, I thought I was being a good son. The letter detailed how Rebecca had manipulated him for 3 years. She'd intercepted phone calls, redirected mail, even convinced him I was hiding early dementia symptoms from the family. Every conversation we'd had, she'd later interpret as evidence of my declining mental state. She said you'd agreed to sign over financial power of attorney but kept forgetting our appointments. When I asked to talk to you directly, she claimed the doctor advised against stressing you with legal details. Reading his words, I could see how it happened. Rebecca was smart. She didn't ask Marcus to lie. She fed him carefully constructed half-truths until he genuinely believed I needed protection from myself. She'd turned my own son into a weapon against me, and he'd never realized he was being used. The day I saw you in court, looking so strong and clear-minded, I started questioning everything. When Detective Rodriguez showed me the recording of Rebecca's confession, I understood how completely she'd fooled us both. Marcus had filed for divorce before Rebecca's arraignment. He'd also written similar letters to the other victim families, apologizing for his role in their losses. The district attorney confirmed Marcus was considered a victim himself, manipulated, not criminal. But knowing someone was manipulated doesn't automatically fix the damage they caused. I know I destroyed your trust. I know sorry isn't enough. But I need you to know, when I thought you were in danger, everything I did came from love. Wrong love, misguided love, but love. The letter included copies of everything Rebecca had shown him. Fake medical reports. Forged bank statements claiming I'd been making erratic financial decisions. Even a false police report suggesting I'd been wandering confused in public. She'd built an entire fictional version of my mental state, complete with professional documentation. I want to earn your trust back, Dad. If you'll let me try. I understand if you can't forgive me right away. Or ever. But the grandchildren miss their grandfather. They keep asking when they can visit the ranch again. That hit harder than the betrayal. Emma and little Samuel, asking about Grandpa's horses and the tire swing by the creek. They'd been kept from me for months while their mother orchestrated my financial destruction. The letter ended with an offer: I'll do whatever it takes. Supervised visits. Family counseling. Legal agreements that protect you from any future claims. I just want my father back. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the desk drawer next to my father's will. Some decisions need time. Some forgiveness has to be earned step by step, not given all at once. Could you forgive family betrayal if they truly changed? The new will was different, not because I trusted less, but because I'd learned more about protecting what matters from people who claim to love you. Sitting in attorney Patricia Morse's Tucson office, I realized that trust isn't something you give, it's something you verify. The documents spread across her mahogany desk represented a complete overhaul of everything I'd previously assumed about family and inheritance. Mr. Martinez, what you're creating here isn't just a will, it's a fortress, Patricia said, reviewing the trust structure we'd designed. This protects your assets from anyone who might try to manipulate your heirs. The Leonard Martinez family trust included provisions I'd never considered before the betrayal. Marcus would inherit, but through a supervised trust that required financial transparency and family counseling completion. The grandchildren's education and healthcare were protected through separate funds that no one could touch. Most importantly, the ranch itself would be held in trust, managed by an independent board including Maria Santos and Margaret Thompson. But the provision I was proudest of was the one nobody expected, a fund dedicated to helping other elder fraud victims fight back. 10% of the estate's annual income would go to legal aid organizations and fraud investigation units. Rebecca's attempt to steal my legacy would end up protecting dozens of other families. The trust also includes whistleblower protections, Patricia explained. If anyone, family or otherwise, attempts financial manipulation, there are automatic triggers that alert authorities and freeze assets until investigation is complete. I'd learned that traditional wills assume family members have good intentions. The new trust assumed they might not, and planned accordingly. Marcus would have access to inheritance, but only through a system that rewarded honesty and punished deception. What about Marcus's redemption? Patricia asked. The supervised trust allows him to demonstrate trustworthiness over time. If he completes counseling and maintains financial transparency for 5 years, supervision lifts automatically. The ranch management structure fascinated me most. Instead of leaving everything to one person who might be manipulated by a spouse, the property would be managed by a 3-person board. Decisions required majority vote. Financial records would be audited annually. No single person could ever again steal what 4 generations had built. You're creating accountability without destroying opportunity, Patricia noted. Marcus can still inherit, he just has to prove he's learned from his mistakes. The document signing took 2 hours. Every page represented a lesson learned from Rebecca's manipulation. Every provision protected against a specific type of family betrayal I'd experienced or researched. When I signed my name on the final page, I wasn't just planning my death, I was protecting my family's future from their own potential weakness. Your estate plan might have the same holes Leonard's had. Subscribe to learn how to plug them before predators find them. There's one more thing, I told Patricia. I want to establish a family reconciliation fund. If Marcus demonstrates genuine change and completes all requirements, there's additional inheritance available. But if he backslides into manipulation or dishonesty, everything goes to the Fraud Victim Assistance Fund. The new legacy plan wasn't about punishment, it was about wisdom. I'd learned that loving someone means protecting them from their worst impulses, not enabling them. The trust would teach Marcus responsibility while safeguarding the ranch from future Rebeccas. Walking out of that office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Not because the battle was over, but because I'd built walls that would protect my family long after I was gone. The trust included one provision nobody expected: funding to catch the next family fraud scheme. What legacy would you create from your worst betrayal? At 70, I finally understood what my father meant: the strongest walls are built from the stones people throw at you. 1 year after the birthday betrayal, I stood on my ranch porch watching the sunrise paint the New Mexico mountains gold. The same view my father had loved, the same land he'd protected, now secured for generations because I'd learned to build walls from the attacks against me. Marcus was coming for lunch today, our first unsupervised visit since the arrests. 6 months of family counseling had changed him. Not back to who he was before Rebecca, but into someone better. Someone who understood the difference between love and manipulation, between protecting family and enabling destruction. The grandchildren would arrive this afternoon. Emma, now 8, had been asking about the horses. Samuel, 6, wanted to swing on the tire his great-grandfather had hung by the creek. They didn't understand the legal battles, they just knew Grandpa's ranch was home again. Rebecca was serving 12 years in federal prison. Dr. Henley lost her medical license and faced similar time. Heritage Land Holdings was dissolved, its assets distributed back to victim families. 47 families recovered property worth over $60 million because I'd refused to disappear quietly. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom or the headlines. It was in the trust documents locked in my safe, protecting future generations from anyone who might mistake kindness for weakness, love for opportunity, or family loyalty for financial access. The Fraud Victim Assistance Fund had already helped 6 families fight inheritance theft attempts. Maria Santos was hired full-time by the Arizona Attorney General's office. Margaret Thompson started volunteering at legal aid clinics, teaching other elders to recognize manipulation tactics. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Dad, I know I have years of trust to rebuild. Thank you for giving me the chance." I typed back, "Family isn't about perfection, son. It's about learning from mistakes and protecting each other better next time." The desert sunrise looked the same as always, but I saw it clearer now, through eyes that had learned the difference between family and loyalty, between love and manipulation, between surrender and strategic silence. The ranch would continue. The trust would protect it. And someday, when Emma and Samuel inherited this land, they'd inherit more than property, they'd inherit the knowledge that dignity and patience can defeat any amount of calculated greed. Thanks for following Leonard's journey. If his fight for dignity inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of courage triumphing over betrayal. Leonard's story proves that quiet dignity can defeat loud manipulation. If this touched you, subscribe for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Tell me in the comments which moment hit you hardest. Remember, your legacy isn't just what you leave behind, it's how you protect it while you're still here. What takes more strength, fighting family or forgiving them? Share your thoughts below.